see you. I don't think I want to come and talk to myself tonight. There we are. So I'd like to call to order the joint meeting of the Norwood Public Utilities Board of Commissioners and Sewer Authority for Tuesday, February 24th, 2026. In order to effectively run our meeting online, I'd like everyone to announce their name and title before speaking if they're joining us via WebEx. Like we have anybody joining us online? No problem. So we're going to go to a 15-minute public comment period. Anybody from the public here tonight? Okay.
He's a reporter. So he doesn't do public comment.
Oh, okay. No problem.
I fixed that.
Sorry.
The day.
So we'll move along to agenda item number 3. Now accept the motion to approve the minutes from the last regular meeting of the MPU Board and Sewer Authority meeting on Tuesday, January 27th, 2026. Single motion, these minutes can be approved with one vote. Motion made by Bill. Get a second. Any discussion on the minutes? All those in favor? Say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes to approve the meeting from Tuesday, January 27, 2026. Moving on to agenda item number 4. Information provided by tonight's meeting. Are there any questions for Jeff or the staff on the materials that were provided in the board package last week? i.e. financial update, leadership team template, and customer service data. Bill, do you have anything, sir?
The only, couple things. One, Chris Demira is doing the story.
Well, we're waiting to hear that. We're setting up the time. So they reached out to us last week, said they had a week or so. So we're waiting to hear.
And that's gonna be on rates.
There's a comparison, operation models and rates between us and the investor. So that's our.
And when they do write it out, will you send it to us?
I always do.
Thank you.
Always. Stu, do you have anything for Jeff or the staff?
I'm all set.
I've got a quick question on financials. I asked, maybe at the last meeting, about the CMAC fund to take care of the volatility of prices. And those funds are all individualized. They're not commingled. And they earn money from interest and also earn money from CMAC profits, I believe. And I asked whether that money, even though it's an off-balance sheet account, I asked whether that money is counted in terms of our 10% that we owe to the city. And you said no. But I thought Steve said, and I could be completely wrong about this. So I thought Steve said that none of the interest income is counted as income for purposes of the 10%, that it's simply the revenue from operations. Is that correct?
Yes.
So let me try to understand this. We have money from operations come in the first month of the fiscal year. And there's some excess money. And we send the excess money to Bob Mahoney down at the treasurer, down at City Hall. And he invested at M&T Bank. And he earned some interest, and that interest goes into our account. That money does not get counted as part of our 10% obligation to the city.
Correct. It's utility services revenues, miscellaneous revenues. It's operational revenues that are part of the 10% to the city.
Okay. I mean, it just seems to me that income from float is part of operations, but maybe that's wrong. And I guess just for some perspective, if we counted it, what would be the impact in terms of the 10% were to go up?
Minimum.
Mhm.
minimal. It basically depends on where our interest rates are. Right now, they're a little bit higher than they had been. At one point in time, we were seeing a few $1,000s a year in interest. Now it's a little bit higher. Of course, interest expense is significantly higher than it has been. Those are all below the line items as opposed to operational items.
Wait a minute, now I'm confused again. Interest rate expenses, if we borrow money, you say that's below the line, does that mean that doesn't get deducted from our 10%, or it does, or how does that work?
Now, that's below the line adjustment. So our 10% is based on revenues. It has nothing to do with expenses in any way, shape, or form. How much we bill out to our customers for gas, electric, and water utility
Yep.
services, along with our other operational revenues that are all part of that process, field service, when we go out and thaw water service, those types of things. So anything that has to do with operations and service to a customer.
Mhm.
Okay.
Thank you.
Jerry, do you have anything for Jeff or the staff on the materials that were provided in the board package last week, sir?
Good, thanks.
Thank you. Okay,
Sean, I have one more question.
Bob, absolutely.
So Jeff, I got a letter from American Water Resources. It's a company that offered insurance and coverage if a water line now, I'm not a public court, so it doesn't apply to me, I don't know why I got it. But are you aware of that company?
Periodically, we see companies go out and do these insurance offerings, because as I think everyone's aware, once it goes off of city property, then you ultimately are responsible for that service.
Do you know how many do we have a year of those? You know,
What do you mean?
when they're people replacing their line from the house.
Do you have a feeling for that there?
Maybe 10 to 20 a year. Yeah, they offer that in sewer as well. They're usually private insurance companies who insure
Yeah,
sewer.
it seemed kind of hokey to me.
Yeah, that they knock on our door fairly often. We really can't be involved in it. It's a private matter. It's like a different level of homeowners insurance. I mean, you could have homeowners that covers flood as well, so they call flood. So it's really piggybacks on top of that. Most companies probably wouldn't use it, to be honest with you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for your questions and your answers, everyone. We're gonna move along to agenda item number 5, under strategic presentations. We have 5 strategic presentations tonight. Jeff, would you like to start with the auditor's report?
Sure would. Brett, would you like to introduce our guest tonight?
So, in front of you, board, you'll have a copy of the audited financial statements from fiscal 2025. Here with us tonight, we have Melinda Kuwains from Clifton Larson Allen. She's a partner with them. She's been our audit lead for MPU as well as the city for the past couple of years. And tonight she'll go over the results of the 2025 audit that she did at City Council a few weeks ago.
Thank you, Brent. And thank you for having me tonight. Hope everybody is all shoveled out. I know we're still working on it. I'm here today to present the results of the fiscal 25 audits. And I say audits because we do financial statement audit, a federal single audit, and a state single audit. The federal and state single audits are audits of major grant programs. And I do want to touch upon that today because some programs that we did test do relate, and more specifically to NP. High level results of the audit. We had unmodified opinions on the financial statements, and that means it's the best opinion you can get. It's clean, it's unmodified. That's exactly what you want to get. There were no findings reported for internal control findings, no compliance findings as well. For the federal and the state single audits, as I mentioned again, unmodified opinion on those audits. There were no findings, no significant items that needed to be reported. The I say two, but it's probably more accurate to say 3 programs that we tested that relate to NPU would be the Clean Water State Revolving Funds. We have the Clean Water Federal Funds, and also, this one's a long one, Natural Gas Distribution, Infrastructure Safety, and Modernization Grants. So those were all 3 programs that we tested this year that more relate to the NPU side, so that's why I wanted to mention that. I will, I guess, first kind of walk through the financial statements that you should have in front of you. I would turn your attention first to the independent auditor's report on page 1. And this is essentially, the only thing that we as auditors provide to you. This is our report on the financial statements that, management prepares. We have a clean unmodified opinion in here. We have just one note of emphasis of matter, which you'll see every year, is essentially that, NPU is part of the city. So these financials are basically derived from that full set of financial statements, because you do have your own, set of financial statements. So that's the only thing of note that I would say, that you want to look at in the independent auditor's report. I would then turn to page 4. This is management's discussion and analysis. And this is a really, really good overview of the financial statements and the results of the financials. And it's prepared by management. So it's, through the lens of management. It's, easily, more easily read, than going through, a long set of financial statements. It, kind of combines policy and accounting. And it's a really good overview. So if you don't read anything else, you'll want to read through the management discussion analysis for sure. It's really, really important. So I will turn to page 12, the statement of net position, and we'll do some kind of high-level financial highlights. So on page 12, you'll see the total assets of about $328.1 million are offset by total liabilities of about $159.6 million, leaving a net position of $162.1 million. And this is an increase from last year, about $24.6 million increase. And we'll talk for the reasons for that on the next statement that we'll look at. But I do want to point out, if you do look at the net position, the majority of that net position is related to net investment in capital assets, which means it's your capital assets less any debt that's taken to acquire those assets. So turning to the next page, this statement of activities, this is essentially your income statement.
Can we back up for one quick second?
Sure.
When we talk about the assets and the value of the assets, if they're physical assets, is that a depreciated number or just a?
Yes.
It is.
Yes, so that is the net depreciated number. And I can show you in the footnotes where you can see the total value of the asset prior to depreciation.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. On the statement of activities, total operating revenues about $106 million. Majority of that is obviously the charges for services. The customer billing was relatively stable this year, aside from, I believe, gas due to a colder winter. There was an increase in utility rate effective, I believe it was November of 24. So that also kind of contributed to a slight increase. Not a major increase, but overall increase in the charge for services. The expenses also increased about $3 million, so similar in line to the increase in revenue. Total operating income was $12.6 million. And then further down, you'll see non-operating income, capital contributions, and the transfer out to the city. And the capital contributions is essentially the grants that came in. The few that I just mentioned, the Clean Water Fund, a substantial grant this year. So that was about an increase of about, I think, $12 million in grant revenue over prior year. So you'll see the change in that position of $24.5 million. That is about $13 million higher than last year, mainly attributable to the increase in the grant revenue that she received during the year.
And that's the activity at the wastewater treatment plant that's driving the majority of that.
Okay, the next page, page 14, is the statement of cash flow. This is a good statement to look at, just it's, it's a cash basis. It shows you what cash, how the cash came in and what the cash was used for. So I won't go into detail here, but there is a lot of information for you to see exactly where the cash came from and, how it flowed out of NPU. The following page, page 15, this is the start of the notes to the financial statements, and this is where you can kind of dive in a little bit deeper from some of the numbers that you see on the face of the statements. So I will go to page 19, and that is where you'll see the capital assets. So at the top, you'll see capital assets not being depreciated. That would just be construction in progress and land. Those aren't depreciated. Construction in progress is depreciated once it's placed into service. But while it's being constructed, it's not depreciated. The second section there are your capital assets that are being depreciated. And then you'll see further down on the following page is the accumulated depreciation. So this is a good roll forward, so you can see what has been added to the capital assets, what has been transferred out, if a project was completed and placed into service, and any disposals of capital assets. On the following page, page 21, I'd also like to call attention to this footnote. It's a really good breakout of all the long-term debt that NPU has. Again, it's a roll forward, so you'll see beginning balance, any new debt that's taken out, payments on the debt, and the ending balance. So you'll see about $31.6 million of the new borrowing, that direct State of Connecticut serial note direct borrowing. I'd also like to call your attention to compensated absences. There was a change in how that had to be accounted for this year. It was a new GASB called GASB 101. We had to work with the team to, well, I didn't do work. These guys did the work, Brent and Laura. They had to figure out, the new way to record the accrued sick and vacation time. So the effect of that adjustment was not a material number, so we didn't have to restate anything. The activity just flowed through the current year. But that might jump out to you, just because there is a significant addition and reduction. And then the following page is the pension footnote. As you know, NPU is part of the city pension plan. The pension plan of the city is 99.5% funded, which is great. Almost 100% funded. And, that's, due to the pension bonds that were issued a few years ago. I don't usually see around her, so that's great. And then I would just point your attention to page 33. This is essentially the statements that you saw in the front, just broken out by division. So gas, electric, water, and sewer. This is where you can see all the individual activity and assets. And, as you know, being set up as, it's an enterprise fund, it should be self-sufficient. And clearly, it is, there's a healthy net position, there's a healthy change, increase in net position. So that's, one thing that we always look at as auditors to see if there's an increase and it's self-sufficient.
If I have a quick question, getting back to the pension fund.
Yeah.
You may not know this, it may not be part of the audit, but do you know what the actuarial earnings assumption is that the pension fund uses to calculate its liabilities?
I do not. I would have to look into that and get back to you. That's something that you're interested in. There is a very large actuarial report that is prepared. So that is my presentation. I just want to thank Laura, Brenton, and Val, the whole team for such a successful audit this year. It's always a pleasure to come here and continue the relationship. Really, it's a very clean audit. Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Right, next up, for strategic presentations, we have natural gas production, LNG plant operation.
For this one, we're gonna have Chris Golis, gas production manager, construction manager. And we can talk about all the things that happen behind the scenes when the weather gets cold that, I'm gonna say doesn't keep us up at night because I'm confident in the team's ability to manage it, but there are a lot of moving parts, and this winter being the coldest we've seen since, let's get a little year thunder, since the 15-15 winter. It's been particularly challenging, but we've risen to the challenge, and Chris is gonna talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so a good way for me to get my feet wet first year in the new position. Barry put me in a really good spot to take the department over, and with everyone's guidance and help, we've been able to really ramp up this winter in weather conditions we haven't seen in quite some time. So really a lot of effort from the entire team, and everybody set this process up to get us to this point. So we'll go through a little bit through LNG first. Obviously, if you've ever driven through the industrial park, you've seen our very large thermos up there. That holds roughly 55,000 gallons of liquefied natural gas. There is no mechanical cooling at all involved in the storage of this. So that basically just sits there passively boiling off and maintaining its own temperature. We'll get into that a little bit further on, but that's the only storage unit for the LNG facility, keeping that product waiting there for us to use as needed, which we've had to do. I think we're at 5 run days so far this year, Brenton, roughly, consecutively during the last cold snap. So Brenton does a great job on forecasting the prices and the weather and making sure we're ready to go if need be. Sometimes he makes that call at 6 o'clock in the morning that we're not going to run that day. We're already on site ready to go, but he does a great job of keeping us informed and prepared so we can meet the needs. So the tank was commissioned roughly 1974. Construction started 69-70. And the official commission date 1974 again holds roughly 55,000 gallons of liquefied natural gas, which is natural gas that's been cryogenically cooled to negative 260 degrees, which reduces the volume roughly 600 times, right? So the expansion ratio of liquefied natural gas is 600 to 1 from its natural state. So it allows us to store a very large capacity, roughly 4,500 MCFs of energy sitting in that thermos bottle up there in the industrial park, waiting for us to vaporize it off. Regasification it's called, so we can put it back out into the system when we are up and running, depending on the demands on the system at that time. We run somewhere between 75 and 85 MCF an hour. We've seen as high as the high 80s and as low as the low to mid 70s. Again, depending on what the system's allowing us to put out to it because of differential pressures. And we can't exceed the pressure in the system, so we have to maintain a pressure and temperature level that's compatible with the system. And then we can go ahead and put that out to help meet the demands without having to buy additional off the pipeline.
Is the tank pressurized?
So the tank itself sits under a natural vacuum. So that helps with the boil off process. So between the insulation, the negative 260 degrees, the liquid vapor, and it vaporizes off to maintain that temperature and pressure. Traditionally, we run that in a vacuum, and that helps maintain the pressure.
And it boils off at what temperature?
Boils off, it maintains pressure and temperature, right around 55 PSIG is kind of where the tank wants to sit, somewhere in that level. And it really depends on ambient temperature. The gas that's actually in there, gas can actually, when it's liquefied, can actually be different BTU levels. So the mixture of the gas has a little bit to do with that as well.
So to get it to boil, you heat it or you just take the pressure off?
Yeah, no, so we actually have 3, which we'll show you later. We have 3 modulating, cascading natural gas boilers in the control room, which are new in the last 2.5 years. And we actually heat a glycol mixture through a buffering tank, and that goes out to a vaporization coil out in the system. So we take the LNG and we run it through the multi-pass vaporizer, heat it up to a tolerable temperature to go out into the system in that 50-degree range. We then odorize it, and then it is put out into the system. Yeah. Historically, sorry.
Do they hydrostatically check these tanks from time to time?
That is a question I can't answer.
Because I mean, propane cylinder gets checked, oxygen cylinder gets checked, acetylene, nitrogen, argon, they all get checked and they all have a lifespan as far as the vessels, hydrostatic inspections and everything else. You say that thing was built in 1974, that's been around.
Commission built in 69, but Barry can maybe answer.
Yeah, so
Detail.
it's not designed to see high pressures that might require that. And there are pressure relief valves everywhere that keeps the pressure down at, I think the ball is 75 pounds to when you have an emergency event. And I will tell you that we had, and Chris will get to this a little bit, we had a vacuum and insulation assessment, and even though it is 50 years old, the tank performed very well here. We had it held it back and fine. Some of the insulation had settled, but not to the degree they expected.
So what's the working lifespan on that tank?
I don't have a number, but we're approaching probably the half-life. There's
Halfway?
the half-life.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, there's tanks out there that are this old, they're functioning very well.
Okay.
There's a company that was up in New Hampshire that made it, made so locally here in the United States, so, yeah, we're not terribly concerned yet, but of course, at 50 years old, it's, yeah.
Everything in the city's old and it's falling apart. Just saying. All right, thank you.
So, in its original requirements, historically it was used to supplement pipeline natural gas when pressures from the pipeline were too low to feed the city's daily demands. So it was more used to make sure that we maintained enough natural gas available to the customers. Early in the 2000s, it kind of shifted needs and was used more of for more financial purposes. And then, so in that 2000, 2001 era, when natural gas started to go up in price, LNG really wasn't a marketed item at that point, so we were able to purchase it at a much lower rate. So they were able to leverage purchasing of liquefied natural gas and putting it out into the system as cost-saving measures. Very, very important. And roughly since 2005, its primary use is to supplement for peak shaving. So when the gas market becomes very volatile, we're going to exceed our projected numbers, purchase numbers for that day. We can use it to make sure that what we purchase off the pipeline doesn't exceed those numbers. And if we do, then that's when the market becomes very volatile. I think we talked a little bit today about, sometimes you can see, $400 to $500 a decatherm versus the $20 to $25 decatherm that we can traditionally purchase natural gas for. And again, that's a constantly moving market. Brenton does a great job every evening of taking the daily information and forecasting it out to the asset managers. I get it included in that now. So when I know he's calling my phone at night, that he's seeing something in the upcoming days that we really need to be prepared for. So primarily during peak shaving, I've been here since 2008. Our last real run cycle was in that 2017, 2018 timeframe. So to run for the amount of days that we did this year is kind of not a normal exercise for us, but it was a great number one training with two of the newer maintenance mechanics being in gas production. Our senior maintenance mechanic is very seasoned. It was a great opportunity to train those guys up. So our future looks very solid in the LNG portion of our system. Again, LNG is trucked in from various sources. These assets are purchased in advance. Nominations are made. Brenton gets pricing. We schedule these deliveries. Traditionally, we take them in the middle of the week, mid-morning, right? Let everybody get in. The trucks travel overnight. They're staged. They're ready for us first thing in the morning, usually somewhere around a 7, 8 o'clock delivery. We offload that. Again, it's about 850 decatherms worth of energy comes in on each one of those trucks. If you've never seen the process, we have a picture of a blow-off later when we actually remove the remaining pressure off of that tanker truck before it goes back on the road. It's a very volatile and dangerous process, right? When you're using a cryogenic pump to move negative 260 degree liquefied natural gas from a tank to a larger holding facility, the stainless steel hoses and all the safety gear that goes along with that. It's a very impressive process to watch.
I'm gonna throw the word potentially in there. We're using volatile gas. Right, there are very strict processes and procedures that we follow to ensure the utmost safety.
Very, very specific, step-by-step process. We're only required to have one person on site. We always run an AB now. So if there ever were an issue with the A person taking the load, one person takes charge. The other people are there basically to oversee and assist. The truck drivers, for the most part, the last 2 years since I've been involved, have been very knowledgeable and trained people. So it makes it a little bit easier for us when they know their operation of their truck, the capabilities of their truck makes our job that much easier. We can focus on actually removing the liquid from their tank to ours with little to no interruption at all.
Do you run some kind of electrical jumper between the truck and the?
It's grounded. The truck gets grounded, absolutely. So we have a dedicated ground wire there. So part of our procedure, whenever the truck driver comes in, we check all the information, we check the truck, we remove the keys from the driver, they're taken from him. We ground the vehicle, we document everything. It's a very specific, everybody's got their required PPE.
So you have a checklist.
We have, yes, we have a step-by-step procedure that's followed every single time. Yeah. The liquid is constantly boiling off. I mentioned that a little bit. That's how it maintains temperature itself inside the tank. That boil off gas then gets warmed up and sent out, odorized and sent out into our system. It's kind of a byproduct of what we have, but it has to happen in order to maintain that temperature without mechanical refrigeration. This process is referred to as auto refrigeration. It self-cools itself by boiling off and maintaining the temperature inside of the tank.
So that, I was gonna ask a question, but you went and answered it.
Mhm.
So all the gas that boils off from the tank is put into
It goes back into our system,
okay, our system.
back into the distribution system.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. And Brenton monitors this through the levels of the tank. So we actually have a level gauge inside the tank. So we weekly read that, and Brenton has a very impressive Excel spreadsheet that he can put all that information to, and he can, to within fractions, tell us exactly what's left in the tank for gallons and when we can take loads on and things like that. So they monitor that, so we know exactly what's being boiled off into the system. During operation, which again is very rare, but we were able to do this year to help balance out the product in the system. We do what's a vaporization process called regasification. So we take that negative 260-degree natural gas, we vaporize it off, bring it up to right around that 50-degree temperature, where we then odorize it. This is done again through those 3 new cascading boilers, just under 1 million BTUs, right? If you're familiar with anything in that industry, there are 9,999,999 BTUs. There's a tag that goes on each single one of those levels. So if you've ever bought a boiler in your own house, it's usually 199,900. There's reasons, right? It's insurance reasons and things like that. So they're very specific, but we have 3 of those. And every single time we run that plant, so if LNG goes into operation, we have a minimum of 2 qualified members on staff, understanding that gas production is a 3-person department, right? So we have very little extra bench strength at this point. And we're actually 1 up from times past. And these technicians also take care of the distribution system. They're not just LNG technicians. So we have 1 SME, 1 senior maintenance mechanic who runs the entire operation. We're in the process, Barry and I just need to sit down and sign off with one of our newer maintenance mechanics who is now fully OQ qualified to work on our distribution system, will be a certified LNG operator as well. So he did the last 3 startups and shutdowns of the plant, supervised by Sean and myself, but fully independently. So we're comfortable that we're going to sign him off. So we'll have 2 fully qualified, signed off LNG operators. And hopefully our 3rd maintenance mechanic gets to that level in the very near future.
Every procedure has a checklist for him to go through every time.
So we have a field-based form that gets filled out every time we start and shut down, and it is very specific as to the steps that we follow. Right, we go through our startup procedure, we start turning things on, we have to call Algonquin, right, Enbridge, and let them know that station 053, we just talked about this earlier today, which is the Norristown station. We need to let them know that they're gonna see decreased usage on their station, so they don't think they have a pipeline rupture. So very specific. We work with our control room operators, but it is a step-by-step form. It's in field to base. It's electronically saved. It's kind of ironic that we're having this meeting right now. We're in the middle of an LNG audit with our PURA regulators. So tomorrow will be day 5 of our LNG audit. So every single one of those forms is being scrutinized by PURA right now as we've been sitting in this room for 4 of the last 5 business days, minus the storm day. They couldn't make it down yesterday. We were all here working, but they were prepping to come in today and see us again. Again, the 3 new recent boilers that we put in, roughly 1 million BTUs, we talked about that. This was an old cast iron sectional boiler that was in there with a dual rate power flame burner, right? High or low, very, very inefficient. Took long times for it to heat up and cool down. It wasn't a very effective system. We actually sent it out for design. When the design came back and the mechanical contractor was chosen, our staff, Barry, myself, Sean, who's our senior maintenance mechanic, we actually did some reverse engineering on the project, found some value in it, and we're actually able to eliminate an auxiliary boiler that we didn't feel was necessary. So when we dug into all of the actual sizing of the vaporizers and the piping and what we were able to put out, we're actually able to downsize 1 full boiler. And we still ran at full tilt. I will tell you, I was on site when it was negative 15 degrees with wind chill outside, changing a solenoid. We never ran more than 2 boilers full tilt. So our plan was to have 1 boiler redundant, so that if we ever lost one, we could still run at full capacity and put that 80-ish MCF out into the system. But the fact that they're cascading and modulating, there's a lead boiler and then 2 follow boilers, and they actually work within themselves, and they actually have internal technology where they can remember the last run, and they can actually predetermine if they need to ramp up sooner or later, depending on what we're putting into them. So it's adaptive technology. It's constantly thinking for us. So you might see all 3 boilers running at 30%. That's the most efficient way for them to run, and that's all within the boilers themselves. And on the bottom, you'll see we've improved the tank insulation. We've improved the vacuum, right? When they put some new perlite in, they did some imaging to see if there are any hot spots in the tank. They move the insulation around. It has to be packed at a certain density in order for it to perform at its highest level. The tank actually evaluated very well. They did some updates. They added some insulation and moved it around the tank where they needed to. And we're in the process of a planned tank painting at this point. So we've already done all the initial assessments. All of the testing has been done. There was no soil contamination, so we don't have to do any excavation. So it'll just be a standard tank abatement when they're actually doing the process, which was great news to us that we're able to move forward at this point. So we're really close to moving into the next stage of that. So it's been something that's been talked about well before I got into this department. We're going to see it out hopefully here in the very near future. And then on the far right, you can see the original 1970s control panel, right? I think Barry said today, I think that's the one that put, a spaceship on the moon. So it is very much antiquated like that. Some of the buttons stick and we have to pop them open with screwdrivers while we're operating. Not the thing you want to do when you're putting, liquefied natural gas into a system. It's fully functional. It's just dated. We have recently met with our 10-year budget concerns. And we've got some ideas in the 10-year budget that we can get these control panels upgraded to be into the same technology world as the boilers that we're operating. So jumping into gate station. So that was the LNG portion. This will be our gas distribution portion of it. So we have 5 gate stations in town. Those are the areas that we take that high pressure gas from Enbridge, 750 PSIG MAOP, operating between 350 and 650 PSIG on a daily basis. So you can imagine, the quality of training that these guys have in order to work on these types of pipelines. And this is where we take that gas, we take the initial cut on it, drop it down into our serviceable pressures to send out to our district regulation stations. That's the Salem gate station right there. The facility right in front of it with the green framing, that's a heater, bath heater, right? So that way we can heat that natural gas up We want to keep those regulators from freezing, so we try to maintain a constant temperature, that 34, 35 degree range on the bottom end, to make sure that we don't have any freezing inside of our regulators. And that's actually inside of the station itself. Then we get into our district regulation stations. So this is our final pressure change, or pressure cut, as we call it in the industry. Before we send it out to our customers, we may have service regulators on some of our customers on our intermediate, high pressure and high pressure systems, where we take a final cut at the house. But our distribution system basically takes it from, after it's taken that cut from the gauge station, we're gonna make that final adjustment before we send it out into our distribution system. This requires constant monitoring. One of the main reasons we have control room operators on 24/7, 365. They have alarm points, right? We have a high, a low, a high, and a high, right? So there's, okay, we need to get somebody on the move. And then there's, okay, we need to get everybody on the move. So the difference between low and low, high and high, that's temperature and pressure. So you can imagine some of the days that we had in the last month and a half, where we saw 55 degrees during the day, and then a front comes in and it's 10 degrees when we come in at night. So if we have our regulators set to handle 55-degree load, right, almost nobody's using their heat at this point. And then all of a sudden, everybody turns their heat on, or their heat turns on, their Nest thermostat, or whatever technology they're using, decides that it's getting cold outside, they all turn on at once, the pressure can drop very quickly in the system. Our technicians, luckily, all live very close. They're all within a 10 or 12-minute ride, including myself. Call from the control room. We usually can have somebody on site within 20 minutes to go out to look at our SCADA system, identify, right, our low pressure system's all tied together. So it might not be the one that's alarming that needs adjustment. It might be another one in the system that may be more reactive to what the system does. The other portion of that is if we have a really cold night and then a really warm day, right? All this gas is flowing through our pipeline. Now all of a sudden it warms up. Well, all that gas is already going into the system, right? You lift off the throttle, we get what's called line pack. Pressure starts to build because we're not using enough at the end, right? We're not putting enough through our cash registers and into the people's house. So we start to see line pack. Very, very important that we don't overpressurize, right? We have MAOPs, so we want to make sure we react to those just as quickly. That may just be a turn down of one of these regulators to make sure the system stays balanced. It is these are not automatic adjusting regulators. These are manually adjusted. So every single time we see a temperature change of say more than 30 or 35 degrees, either we're forecasting before we leave for the day, or our guys we're blessed to have the people that we have in this system. Sometimes these guys will get up in the morning at 6 o'clock before they come to work for 7. First thing they do is pull up SCADA if they've seen a big temperature change, plus or minus. All right, at 7 o'clock on the nose, they're out there, or if they need to come in earlier, they'll do that, and they'll make those adjustments. You never even know they're doing this stuff in the system. It's constant hands-on and evaluation. So that was a real quick job. So that I was just gonna get to that. That's why I had to go back. So this is our Dunham Street station. So the red piping is our 60 MAOP system, what we call high pressure in town, right? We have our high line, which runs from Mohegan Park all the way out. Route 2 used to be the feed for out to Foxwoods, ends at Lot 10 out there. So the red denotes our high pressure system, goes through the wall after the regulators. Last regulator adjusts the pressure. So we have green, which is our low pressure system, yellow, which is our intermediate system, and it goes out into our system. So everything's color coded in our system. It's our GIS mapping is exactly the same.
Our plant, you know, most of the stuff for our generators feeding our standby generators all yellow.
Yep, that's all low pressure gas. Yep. Standard colors in the industry. These guys do a great job, as you can tell by this station. This wasn't clean to take your picture. This is how these guys operate these systems. They try to maintain them. Sometimes they're going in there at 3 o'clock in the morning, dealing with a higher low pressure or higher low temperature situation, and to have a clean, comfortable environment to work in. Now, these are open to the atmosphere. They're not warm. They're not climate controlled, right? These have open vented doors. So it's whatever the temperature is outside, they're working on inside as well. So, and sometimes we require heaters inside these spaces to keep them to temperature. Okay. And the last picture we have is our newest DR station over here on North Main Street, right next to customer service. This was a group effort, primarily in-house. So the garage mechanics working with the gas production mechanics prepped and painted all of these pipe in-house. In the middle, you'll see the underground department setting all of this piping into place. And then on the right, you'll see the finished product. Questions? Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I think this really speaks to the skill of the individuals that do this, because I know from spending time in the control room, a lot of times on other things, electric outages and whatnot, that you hear how often adjustments are being made, multiple sets of eyes, multiple checklists, multiple, safeties to make sure that everything stays where it needs to be. That's good. Yeah, I didn't come here to visit yet.
All right, next up, we have the impact of winter weather.
So one of the reasons Brett's going to give this presentation, one of the reasons I wanted to bring this forward tonight is having had the coldest winter since again 14-15, that's going to increase consumption significantly for heating. And I know a bunch of you have had questions. We've all had questions on, obviously that impacts consumption, which impacts utility cost, but it also impacts wholesale energy markets. So the full impact of this winter isn't going to be known for another month or two. Brenton came to kind of tell us where we're at this point, how it's affecting actual end customers, and then also kind of a little preview into what it's going to look like longer term for the industry. So thank you, Darren.
Oh, thank you, Jeff. So, great segue from Chris. We're going to touch on some of the topics that he had mentioned. But as Jeff said, we're just going to go over kind of the winter so far and what we're thinking it's going to shape out to be and how it's going to impact our customers. So overall, customer impacts this winter. Winter temperatures are lower than normal. At its base, we're heavy on the heat load, so that's going to cause customer heating bills to be higher in previous years and previous months, right? This is the coldest December to February that we've experienced since about 14-15, so well over 10 years. And then not to mention within that time frame, January 24th, February 8th, I'm not sure, I think this may be called Storm Fern, across the nation, we just call it winter. But
Depends what your weather outlet is.
yes, which weather outlet you don't need to look at. But Storm Fern was that 2-week stretch where we had some really severe sustained frigid temperatures. That 2-week stretch where it averaged about 18 degrees, we hadn't experienced a 2-week cold snap like that since about 17-18. We continue to expect that heating customers are going to have high bills or see high consumption on their bills through March, right? Bills that go out during the month of March will be reflective of consumption in February and March. So we expect that trend to kind of continue. On the plus side, we are expecting this to potentially be a record year for gas sales volumes. It has been that sustained cold, for the entire year. And we weren't the only people sort of feeling the cold temps around Storm Fern. It was just widespread cold and snowy conditions, around the country. There was, some record low temperatures in some areas. There was record snowfall in some areas. There was near freezing temperatures as far south as Miami during this time frame. So it was really across the entire eastern half of the US. But during this time, we had 7 of our top 40 days ever occurred during this 2-week stretch. So we did have some good days. And at the end of it, energy costs, during these times, they're at their peak. And we're utilizing all of our procurement strategies within our control in order to minimize impact to customers as much as possible. Yes.
I know I get the oil, I get the gas, but a lot of our buildings here are rentals.
Yep.
So a lot of renters, they supplement their heat with space heaters, using more electricity. Now, is there a reflection on our electrical consumption as well? Is that spiking due to this?
You see a very similar trend in electric, and especially even more so over the last couple of years. There's been a large, and Mary Luke speaks this from the efficiency program, a lot of heat pumps. There's been a big interest in converting to electric heat, not converting from gas to electric heat here in Norwich, but converting from oil, right, or other fuel sources to electric. So we're seeing that Electric heat load, right, is up. I might even say that the residential peak in the winter might be just as high or pretty close to what it is in August.
Cooling, yeah.
Cooling, that's
So
such a.
that's been getting closer and closer as the years have gone on. But yeah, it is real. It is
Oh, that non-coincidental loads in the electrical business. you know,
Sure, yeah.
heating, cooling.
Well, if you think about one of those little 1,500 watt heaters, right?
Well, actually, that is, I'm thinking about.
It's very benign, right? What people don't realize, that's $250, $300 a month. You let it run 24/7. At current rates, that's what it's gonna cost. And we've had conversations, and I'm talking about Jolene, conversations with customers where, oh yeah, my kid came home from college over Christmas, I plugged 3 of those in downstairs, so I didn't have to turn the heat up. Next thing you know, I got an $800 utility bill last month. What happened? And those are the kind of things that are tough. Now, having said that, the heat pumps and the program that Mary Lou's part of the organization, that's 2.5 times more efficient to heat with a heat pump than it is, and they've gotten much better at cold temperatures than they used to be. And I know some people here have a direct experience with that. So that and traditional electric resistance heat don't fall in the same bucket when it comes to heat efficiency. But to Brenton's point, as you see the region and our community, we like to provide options, right? So we're still providing natural gas options, but we're also providing efficient electric heating options as well in areas where that might be more advantageous.
Good. So just wanted to give you a graphic. This is January weather over the last 11 Januaries, going back from 2015 on the left all the way to the right. Just to give you an idea as far as how cold this was, comparison to previous recent Januaries. That black dotted line is what we consider normal, 20-year average, right? So you can see we constantly ebb and flow around average, but this past January, certainly has been one of the peaks, over the last 10 plus years. So next slide. And a graph that looks nearly identical. This is gas system load, the entire demand of the system for the month of January or the same time frame. The graphs look nearly identical. Once again, that black line is what would be our normalized average January gas load. But these two graphs are identical, just showing how much our gas load is tied to the weather conditions during the winter season. And then lastly, what looks similar, although a little bit different, is your average gas residential customers bill or their usage, their consumption. Once again, trends very, very similar to the weather, to our total gas system demand. The black line would be the normalized average. I know the graph doesn't exactly look like the previous ones, but like I had said earlier, bills issued in January, some of that usage was from December. So where there may have been a cold January and you're not seeing all that usage there compared to the average, we probably had a warm December compared to it. So, but the last 2 years, one of the big takeaways is, we know we had a cold December, we had a cold January, we're having a pretty cold February too. So expecting sales to remain high and usage to be above normal for the winter. So this is just an illustrative graph of all of our top 40 days. The biggest thing to pay attention to here, all the green bars, those are all the 7 days that occurred specifically in that 2-week stretch around Storm Fern. So we haven't had a concentration of peak heating days since 17-18, where we had 10 top 40 days. So we're still hitting peaks, and also we're hitting peaks, especially when it's sustained cold. It doesn't have to be that cold for us to be hitting these peaks. I think a lot of these occur anywhere where it's an average of more than 10 degrees, sometimes even as close to 20 degrees outside. We're at peaks. So it's sustained cold for a long period of time. You see that exponential growth day after day after day.
As you guys are familiar, we had a significant gas expansion program back a few years, but we continue to tie in new customers to natural gas, renew mains, things along those lines. So you see, correct me if I'm wrong, Ben, but you see that impact on load as well. If you were to look years ago on the same day, we're higher than we would have been in that time frame.
Yeah, that has certainly helped. Yeah, we do 20 to 40 new residential customers we're getting on year after year after year. So yeah, absolutely.
Brian, which one's more profitable for us? Is it natural gas or is it electric?
Profitable?
Yeah.
I would say they're both equally profitable just because, the costs that we incur are ultimately passed down to customers at rates. you know, and any sort of return, right, that is put on top of rates, and a lot of this will be in the cost of service presentations and things like that, is mainly just to sustain operations, to invest in capital, to pay debt, and to also pay for the, you know, the future cost of what capital is going to be in the future. So it's the same, is what I would say.
I mean, at the end of the day, we're in a cost business. So as Brendan says, our operating income is to make investments in infrastructure. And that's something that you're going to hear as a theme in this year's budget, investment in infrastructure, so that we can maintain that reliability for years to come. The time to invest for those years to come is now, not when something starts to occur, because then it's too late. So, but that'll be a whole different thing when we get to the cost of service about what the cost drivers are in each of those.
Well, the only reason I asked is because I know that we have, you know, we got conversions to natural gas. If people start to see that, you know, natural gas is more beneficial to them, we start getting more spikes in that. I was just wondering if that contributes more profitability to the organization as opposed to just regular electric customers. That's all.
More customers is better,
Yes.
ultimately. You know, absolutely. I would maybe reframe it, and just like you said before that, the value to the customer.
Sure.
Right, and, you know, I think natural gas continues to prove to be the most value, the most efficient, maybe the most cost effective in a lot of places in the state. You know what I mean? So that's why there is, because consumers continue to respond. There is a lot of push for electrification, but consumer behaviors haven't changed. There still is a preference to natural gas for heating here in New England, especially when you're talking on-demand heating. You know what I mean?
So you don't have to purchase your fuel and figure out how much to get. And the big advantage here we've really talked about is 10% of the gross revenues for gas, electric, and water go to the city. So if we were to take an oil customer and convert them, it really doesn't matter whether we do a heat pump is more appropriate for them or a natural gas heating system. But at the end of the day, that revenue now is coming into the city. Sure. And that's resulting in 10% that's going back to offset taxes in the general fund. So that's very important versus going maybe to an oil company that isn't based in the community.
Absolutely. And more volumes, spread fixed costs over, which is always great.
Having said that, as our sales increase, you know, Brett gets excited about it, right? Because it's gas, but at the same time, it's a greater cost for our community. So we're trying to, he's going to talk a little bit about coming up here, you know, everything that we do to mitigate that wholesale energy cost. Because that's a pass through. That's just money that we collect from the customers and we pass right through to the suppliers. So trying to minimize that as much as possible.
I would assume that one of the other factors here when you're looking at what's more profitable and what's going to happen more often is public policy. I mean, we've come out of a period where if you converted from gas or from oil to a heat pump, you would get a tax credit. It would lower the cost. There was a restriction on gas delivery and gas transmission. Pipelines in New York State were blocked for a period of time. And now you're seeing, and I'm not making good, bad, or different political points here, but now you're seeing a switch to where some of the incentives for use of electric are coming off or are headed to come off, whereas gas is becoming more acceptable. And so, I mean, so I mean, that's got to be a factor too.
Yeah, absolutely. And what we try to do when we do strategic planning at this organization is not react to the latest whim or trend. That makes sense. We want to diversify and provide options for customers. And so by doing that, that's always been our strategy on the efficiency side. We didn't go one way or the other. We're apolitical in that respect. And so as things shift, we're prepared to react to that because we already have. So it's a great point, Bob. And we also put in for Project Rare. So we're looking at an additional, was 1,000, I believe.
Project Rare, yeah, and also repurposing to Ramapo, which hopefully we'll have an update in the next month or two, but we are supposed to get another 1,000 decatherms a day to beat up the Project Maple from Millennium.
So that's just gas capacity. So we have the ability, because as Bob speaks to, that has been really the restriction, is the ability to get the gas into the state and ultimately into our system. So the team has worked well, and again, there's some other benefits that we'll get from that hopefully as well. But again, that gives us options. And I think that is something that will only become increasingly valuable as there's less and less to go.
And just this year, I think, or maybe late last year, we worked out a new contract with Enbridge to provide additional gas. So that's going to impact the situation too.
Good. Any more questions? So getting to procurement and risk mitigation. On January 27th, which I think was the day after weekend, I think it was Tuesday. It's right at the front of Storm Burn when there was just so much cold temperature. Henry Hub had a daily pricing record of $30 a decatherm by gas that day. Algonquin Regional Pipeline, $125 per decatherm on that day. Even Marcellus Shale, our Millennium Pipeline gas commodity, $90 a decatherm for that day. To give you some idea as far as how different this is from normal. Normally Henry Hub and Millennium during January trade about $3 to $5 a decatherm for the month. Algonquin is maybe $10 to $15 a decatherm. So you have some of these areas going up by tenfold or more during that extremely volatile time. And as Chris had mentioned too, when he brought that number of 4 times and $500 gas, what he's referring to is penalty gas on Algonquin. If you take more gas off the system than what you scheduled or nominated, you are subject to not only to buy the gas at $125, but then also a 3 times penalty on top of it in order to even get that gas. So that is 1 decatherm of gas could cost $500. That's $50 a CCF. So the risk potential can be very, very extreme here in New England. So now what we do here at MPU is we do have a lot of resources to help mitigate all these risks, from firm pipeline transportation contracts, pipeline storage, nominating our supplies at first of the month, doing least cost dispatching and diversity supply for daily swing, we have asset management, credit and asset manager, no notice service contracts, and then we also have the LNG plant at the end of the day to also assist with peak shaving. All of these are, with the exception of the LNG peak shaving, all these are utilized on a daily basis, every single day, every single winter, in order to try to keep the risk and the cost as low as possible for our customers. So then lastly, just to finish it off with LNG dispatching, just to add a little bit more color to what Chris had kind of mentioned. We utilize the LNG plant to minimize operational and cost risk exposure, right? It provides immediate dispatchable supplies to the Georgetown area, and most specifically the business park, right? It's sitting right there in town. And it also offsets the cost of expensive pipeline supplies when the market is peaking and reduce the risk of those pipeline penalties, which can be, like we said, 3x. So we primarily dispatch the LNG plant just using a least cost method. Really simple. Is the LNG and the cost of the gas sitting in LNG inventory less expensive than what we're projecting about the pipeline? If it is to a reasonable level, we're going to dispatch the plant, save some money for our ratepayers. And as Chris said, we had operated the LNG plant for 7 out of those 16 days in that cold stretch. So while temperatures were freezing, we had staff out there for 7 out of those 16 days. 2 guys, right, either dispatching supplies, doing the boil ups, sending stuff out into the system, right, or taking deliveries from trucks and replenishing inventory. So it was a very, very busy winter. It was the first time where we had some prolonged activity at the LNG plant since about 1718. So. And just from those operations, we had saved utility customers tens of thousands of dollars in that short window of time, but also just insulated them from that risk potential of hundreds of thousands of dollars of risk. So, are there any questions? That's all I have. Thank you.
Was there any discussion about the PGA and all this?
So that's a great question. This is really a precursor to that. So the reality is, at a high level, it looks like there's going to be an upward pressure on the PGA as a result of a lot of these factors and threats. We've done everything we can to mitigate it, but at the same time,
But that's why it's there.
it's exactly. So having said that, when we meet, Doc, probably it's going to be a good time frame when we're going to know exactly how everything fell out. What is it like the rest of the winter? So the plan is to bring to the board a presentation and update in the April meeting and let you know what the impact will be on the PGA. And we're probably going to do the PPA at the same time because obviously gas has a huge impact on electric costs. And my tentative plan is to bring Dave Messenger in to talk about that aspect as well, directly from the CVEC side. We haven't heard from him in a little while. and have him talk about a couple other things about electric solutions as well.
You bring the guy who did that presentation for the CEO, is that what you're talking about?
No, that's the customer advocate. I'm bringing the CEO of CMAC. He won't elaborate at that level, though the news was good. That was good. There was a lot to it. Thank you, Mayor.
Moving along, we have Bean Hill Substation.
All right, so Steve's gonna talk about this, and I know we mentioned before, we're in the process of looking at moving the Bean Hill substation to literally to higher ground. And as I talked about, again, the overall plan in electric, we had Ernst Mack doing a system analysis, which I think has been needed for some time to help us prioritize where we focus first on these infrastructure investments, now that we have the $150 million bond to support that. You had asked earlier, Stu, we will definitely come back to the board and we will give an executive level presentation on the findings of that. Having said that, as I said before, we know we have to have the foundation. So that are those transmission lines that feed our 3 substations and the resiliency of our 3 substations. That's kind of like phase 0. So Steve's going to talk a little bit about some initial grant requirements around that, and then just get us started on what the long-term plan is. But this is very exciting. This Lightning substation will feed the new business park. It feeds the existing business park. So there is no such thing as a non-critical substation. But this one has paves the way to supporting future growth.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, thank you, Jeff. We're going to talk about the Bean Hill substation relocation, but it starts out as a flood resiliency program because it's actually a project that's funded through DEEP, and that's where it started out. So I'm going to start there, and we'll work into the relocation. If anyone doesn't know where the Bean Hill substation currently resides, it's right there, down right next to behind the Dixie Donuts. Next slide. This is what happened in January 2024. This was a combination of heavy rains, melting snow upstream, and then the potential collapse of the Bowser Dam. And at this point, the basement was getting flooded, the equipment was getting susceptible to being damaged, and we had to shut the station down. We couldn't figure our system, so we could still.
That resulted in the interruption of service to about 5,000 customers.
That's right. Yeah.
And we own that land, or we lease it?
We own this. Yeah. Why they built it there? Probably because nothing else could be built there at the time. Next slide, please. So the original project description, again, it's located within the floodway of the Yannick River. It's considered high risk during river flooding events, and the purpose of this project originally was to develop flood resiliency for the existing station. It's funded in part by Connecticut Deep Climate Resilience Fund grant, and we executed an agreement with them in May of 2024. Subsequent to that, we went out to RFP. The contract was awarded to RLC Engineering in August of 2024, and that included a number of work scope items, a site survey, including required land agreements or any of the easements, environmental impact studies, site plans, substation one-line drawings, detailed design and construction cost estimates. Slide, please. And they completed a review of the flood resiliency measures required for Bean Hill. Potential solutions at the time included raising equipment above the 500-year level, constructing a physical barrier around the station that was above the 500-year level, or looking at building a new station at a higher level that wasn't in the Yannick River floodplain. After looking at all those options, raising the equipment at the existing location and physical barriers were evaluated and were dismissed because of floodway environmental constraints. From a regulatory standpoint, they weren't going to allow us to build anything in the floodway whatsoever. So we started searching for an alternate location for the station. We completed that. The criteria was proximity, of course, to the transmission right away, reconnection to the existing transmission circuits. This is a PTF station. We actually earn money from the transmission grid on the station. So we have to be in proximity to the same existing circuits in order to continue to receive that with the new station.
So this is a huge point because there's actually a revenue stream associated with investing in the infrastructure. And CMAC came in and did a presentation to us on their market analysis of what that might be worth. And it's best, and I don't want to guarantee that at this point, but as best it could be as little as a 10-year payback on the overall investment of the station. So this is one of the few areas where we can improve our reliability and resiliency and get a return on that investment. So that was really pivotal in moving this project forward.
Absolutely. That was very important. And so we did identify an alternative site, and we decided to pursue that for flood resiliency. There's no other options were going to work at the time. Next. Since that time, working with the engineering firm, we got MEPOL and ISO New England Planning Advisory Committee approval to move the project forward. That was a major hurdle. We completed environmental studies on the proposed site, tried to do some EMF studies, geotech, wildlife studies, make sure there were no, frogs or anything living in the area, and then of course wetland studies. And we developed a conceptual design site plan for the proposed
Does this go through city planning or through the Connecticut State Siting Council?
Siting Council. Yeah. Next. So next steps, and this is all short term under the grant. We need to secure the site for the new substation. We're in discussions with the owner right now to do that. We need to hold 2 community engagement meetings, which is a deep requirement. And that's gonna be probably next month, in a month, probably March and April, we'll be doing those. And maybe before, probably before a board meeting. So if you can, everyone can attend.
Like 5 o'clock.
Yeah. Yep. And then we'll complete the Connecticut Siting Council application, or draft of it anyway, and review it with the Connecticut Siting Council and make sure it meets all the requirements, and expect it to be complete by May 2026. Once we do the handoff to Connecticut Siting Council, that's when all the fun begins and all the hard work. And of course, once we get approval from them, we'll go into detailed design, and that's going to take several years. Expected completion on this probably 2030 to 2031 timeframe.
A couple of interesting points on this too, because I gotta admit, I personally was skeptical on this initially when we started it. But because this is something called asset condition, which is a fancy word for saying it's critical to system reliability. Because in that previous spot, you'll notice one of the control boxes for one of the switches on the Eversource side is about 6 inches above the water. So that actually may have gotten flooded prior to our station getting flooded. So this will expedite the permitting process, which is a very critical component. You have so many new requests from everything from data centers to various different loads coming in that have to go through this new cluster process that this is in the process of developing. We're going to be able to circumvent a lot of that. Eversource is in strong support because they have some things, there's one Weakish Junction right adjacent to that on the western property, and they have some improvements they want to make. Basically, each time they break the circuit, then with switching, then it makes the circuit more reliable, because if you get a failure, you can isolate it around power. I know I'm really simplifying this, but that's essentially, so that's why we get a lot of this transmission facility, I believe PTF it stands for, is we get a lot of that revenue. So there's a lot of things coming together, work to do yet, but it's a pretty exciting opportunity.
How much will we be reimbursed for this from DEEP?
From the DEEP grant, that's only about 250 or 200.
So that's for the design?
Yeah, that's initial design. Long-term, it probably won't become a DEEP project at that point. So they got to.
We thought that we were simply going to harden the facility where it was. And then as we started to look into it, we realized that given the regulations, in a floodplain and floodway, there's no real practical way that's going to be allowed to have any meaningful impact. So we were able to repurpose a significant portion of that, but it's a total change in direction of the project.
Do we have a approximate cost of doing the relocating?
Yeah, we did the approximate cost. We haven't figured out in detail yet. It's around 42 million.
So this is included in the budget as part of the $150 million bond, because obviously we don't have that number around. And as we get a return on that investment, that will allow us to use those dollars to invest other areas in the system. So
Yeah, and again, no promises, but based on the forecasted revenue from the PTF, that would get paid for over a 10-year period.
And will we lease fully into buying?
Well, yeah, it's on the Larson property, that's a strategic advantage to be in there, so, Bob Larson, he wants a steady income, so he would prefer an annual lease. Doesn't matter to us at the end of the day, we have the same for the Yannick tank up there with him now. There's a Blue Wave, which was a solar entity that was looking to locate there as well. And so that was one of the initial reasons we started looking, saying, hey, wait a minute, we can get some economies here, serve them and relocate at the same time. The political shift that Bob spoke to has I think, further decreased the likelihood of that occurring, that they want to hang on to their lease. They're going to break a portion off to allow us to build the substation in return. We've been collaborating with them to make sure that we have an agreement to serve should that occur. And that's just the plan all the way around.
You know, I think we need to, I encourage you guys to, educate the people that live my, know what went on in the water tank place there.
I had a firsthand seat on this.
So, anticipate, some opposition.
And I think it's the question, is the right time when it's real enough that, it's going ahead, but we still allow enough runway to have the public meetings, to have the discussions, provide. I was on the job like 3 weeks to get that first organic hearing, right? And over time, we provided information, and customer sentiment improved considerably, but it took some work and it took some time.
Do we have to alter their site?
We've evaluated a couple things, but the question is, what's the impact on the Eversource side? What's the impact on ETF associated with that? Yeah, that's really the multi-pronged.
So are we upgrading for 30.5 at this station or not?
Yeah, this station, it's gonna have two 65 megawatt transformers. So the station itself will be larger than this current station. That's another benefit of relocating a station. They're actually gonna force us to increase the size of it for future growth. And it will feed 34.5 into our system. Yep.
So there's potentially the sub-transmission tie between, or if we get a large enough load, which doesn't appear to be on the table at the moment, a large enough load at OIC, feed that 35 or 5 times.
Absolutely.
Excited stuff.
Good job, Steve. So wastewater treatment plant shipping pump station updates.
All right, last but definitely not least, Matt's going to give this presentation since one of the biggest operations down the wastewater plant is snow blowing at the moment and plowing. He's going to talk a little bit about our Shipping Street pump station project as well.
Yeah, all right, good evening, board. I feel like I have to abbreviate undergo my presentations after the last few, but halfway to have. So wastewater plant, really just a very quick update on winter construction progress. 2 weeks ago, the final and largest of 3 digesters was completely dewatered. So that subcontractor to Nickerson demobilized last week, and today actually they are actively demolishing the kind of the central digester control building, and then the final, what you see in the photo on the left, the final largest digester A will be demolished after that, and it makes way for a new vehicle and storage garage at the plant. And then to the right, kind of coincident with that work, Burble, a subcontractor from Maryland, returned to for their second of 2 mobilizations to the site. This is the subcontractor installing all the cast in place piles for new construction and piping, or large diameter piping at the site. So the large 80-foot rig you see on site now is Burble. It'll be here for about 8 weeks. And then just a quick look ahead schedule. So, as of today's board meeting and the contract duration, we're about 16% complete on schedule. We're about 56% complete paying the contract within the end of January. Through January, early February this year, 2 existing smaller fires have been completely partially demolished, the digester complex is dewatered. Demolition of that complex will continue, hopefully by the end of March, but it may spill into early April. Some of the dewatering work lingered into February. And that's Burkle, they're on site for about 8 to 10 weeks into early April. That is their final mobilization for cast in place piles. And then the second half of this year will be very hot and heavy with a lot of commissioning and startup of new facilities, which are all contingent on MP Electrical actually delivering a second utility circuit to the plant. That work is hopefully planned to be complete for energization of new electrical distribution equipment at the plant by July. In the meantime, we'll have a small startup of the second of 2 primary settling tanks. The first one went into service in November, if you recall. Hopefully by the end of the summer, we'll be commissioning UV disinfection and transitioning from chemical to physical disinfection of our effluent. Likely, hopefully starting up a new effluent pump station, which is a brand new facility / process for the plant for being able to accept more influent flow to the plant and be able to push that flow out against certain tide conditions. And then this fall, it's been a slow work in progress, but is contingent on the new electrical and new blowers that are being delivered from Finland this spring, which I just had a fortune to witness factory testing virtually. That should come online before the end of the year, hopefully this fall, and then admin and lab are, we'll talk about that maybe a year from now. But that's a very quick update, and take any questions you might have. Yes, Jerry.
I have a concern. And I'll tell you why, because the landscape around the harbor's changed. We had an ice cream shop, they went under. Surprise. But we have a nice little restaurant there that wants to operate a year-round thing there. In the past, I know when the atmosphere is a certain way, the air just plays a certain way, we have the wonderful aroma, food sneaking down that harbor. Now I'm wondering, that was in the past with the digester and everything in operation. What is going to stop us from having that same effect going on there in the restaurant full time? They're going to come back after us if the place smells like bad, you know?
So, we scrambled, rapidly to get a temporary odor control system in source for the end of last year when these concerns were brought up. To my knowledge, that has been successful, and we haven't received any odor complaints since. As part of the upgrade, we get a permanent odor control system that's about 15 times the capacity of our temporary system. Actually, the very first thing Burkle did when they got here 2 weeks ago was put in the piles for the new odor control foundation. That system won't come online until the very end of the project, just based on construction sequencing. But I think that the sources of our odors that were new related to storing thickened sludge at the plant, have largely been taken care of for the time being. And that's, as we move out of the winter into the warmer weather, there are supplemental measures that we plan to take at those tanks. Which can't be utilized in winter, but we do intend to supplement what we're already doing.
I'm not getting credit, I just want to get in front of this.
The current plant has no odor control whatsoever.
So basically, raw sewage
It's been
plans
bad.
in 2 different directions with no odor control. Raw sewage now coming inside of the building. Huge difference.
I've been in communication with Beck Roberts since this whole thing went down. Matt and the team down there with Larry's guidance did a great job of filling a gap in the construction schedule to create a part of that odor. There will be no digester in the new system, and then there will be permanent odor control. But the temporary is doing a great job on the sludge handling facility. So I think that would be good, but like I said, that was my only concern. I got a personal thank you for her just to say she hasn't observed anything since we put that temporary system in place, which was great. It was great news to hear. So something that, once in a while, these things happen, but it's how we react.
That's great.
Jerry, you said the landscape of the arena has changed. That has called into business to go out of business. What do you mean by that?
The ice cream business,
Huh?
it's a seasonal business. They tried to make it go a year round and they folded.
Oh, okay.
In fact, that nice big chair is for sale there, the one I need to take a picture of.
He's talking about Encanto's.
Oh, I got you.
Which is, it's too bad because it's easy working on some plans to revitalize that portion of the waterfront. And I think they were a little bit ahead at the time there to have the year-round business.
Yes.
If you went seasonal, they had a better go, but to try to do it year round,
It's just not, no. But at the same time, it's nice to see these guys at the marina having a year-round presence now. I think that restaurant has always struggled from the seasonal aspect. It's hard to get help. It's hard to stand something up for 4 or 5 months and then close up for the year. So that's good.
Business is tough. So. Goes to them. Driving, you know. So, other than that, great job.
We're gonna talk a little bit about Shipping Street.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Two quick slides on Shipping. So Shipping Street is a pump station located, believe it or not, at the end of Shipping Street in the Thanesville section of Norwich. So this station, it's not the only sewer pump station in this context, but it sits in the floodway of the Thames River. So it's analogous to the female substation. We haven't spoken about this project in a while. Jerry, I think actually your introduction to maybe MPU board meetings last May was attending one of 2 public meetings for the project, if you recall. This, I guess I'll just point to the screen. Basically, the Shipping Street pump station sits just at the end of Shipping Street in the unhatched blue square there. The scope of the project, which is supported also by a Climate Resilience Fund grant from Connecticut Deep for preliminary design, is to relocate that pump station out of the floodway. We will still be within the 100-year floodplain of the Thames Reserve, but we'll be addressing that by raising critical infrastructure. The new pump station will have a new force main that will travel west up Shipping Street to West Thames Street Route 32, and then continue north to discharge to what will become an upsized new gravity sewer to accept that flow. And then collectively that flow will make its way, Shipping Street discharges to our South Thames Street pump station. We're going to have a series of pump stations along the Thames to get flow into the plant from the west. And then there's a really unconventional aspect of that station now where there's a gravity neighborhood that we're referring to as the Thames Terrace area that actually discharges by gravity to the existing force main, which introduces some operational limitations on the pumps at that station. So part of the project will also be to reconfigure that neighborhood to discharge their sanitary by gravity out to the new upsized gravity sewer in West Thames Street. That's the project scope in a very quick nutshell. Schedule wise, we are actually wrapping up our grant for the preliminary design effort. Probably by the time of the next board meeting, our deadline is the end of March. Last week, we had our second of 2 public hearings for the project. And then I guess looking forward, last fall, Connecticut Deep announced a second round of the Climate Resilience Fund grant. They're continuing and expanding the program and had 2 categories, one for advancement of preliminary design through detailed design, and another for implementation of construction ready projects. So we applied for the advancement category to bring the project through 100% design and bidding. That application went to Connecticut Deep in middle of January, and we're currently waiting to hear on whether we are awarded that grant. So the schedule from to 2026 forward is all relying on an assumption that DEEP may make an announcement in the next few months, but assuming we are awarded the grant, we would complete detailed design in about a year and have, construction ready project maybe a little over a year from now. If that doesn't happen, we will have to pivot on how we advance the project.
It sets us up to support the development of Shipping Street. If the city ever gets plans to be developing that area, that station will handle anything that could be done. We can't be the reason it stops.
Are all those buildings tied into the sewer line currently? Or are they just shut directly into the river?
I guess no one's discharging, hopefully no one's discharging sanitary from the river, but, I guess all the buildings,
The industrial, the industrial.
Storage and.
Yeah.
They are
But
not,
former CI.
they are not connected to that.
yeah, so north of Shipping Street along Terminal Way is the whole, brownfield area.
Yeah.
I know the city is looking at a grant to redevelop that area, but there's no active,
There's no water service out there. It's only that crosses.
any active sanitary and sewer customers north of, if you go south through Terminal Way, people, of course, there's a gravity sewer in Terminal Way that discharges to the station, and those customers are connected.
Are there any direct overflows in that area?
There was a CSO that closed off years ago. We had a meter in there, it was literally never going off. So that is one of the 3 closed in the last 7 years.
Where exactly is the pump station gonna be located?
So the city owns,
It's down in
this hatch blue, square, just west and maybe slightly north of the is another property owned by the city. And
If you drive down there on the left, you'll see there's like a little concrete slab. Yeah. It still remains, it's gonna be in that area.
the interesting thing is that there's this little corner of the property that is not brownfield impacted.
It's not impacted.
Right, so that was selected to.
I think United Metal was there.
Yeah, that was taken about 10 years ago, but yeah, this is, believe it on the west side of that property, there's actually no contamination with that. It's set up to the rest of the properties.
There's so much food to go on in that area, Terminal Way, it's unbelievable.
Like I said, the current station is literally underground. It's not above ground, it is literally.
It doesn't flood that often there though.
No, it doesn't, but it's still within the zone.
Yeah, of course they moved it. I went into Thayer's, one of their new buildings that they had there during their last open house. I'm looking at the electrical panels way up over here. I said, that's a code violation. They said, well, they already have jurisdiction to prove it because it's in the floodplain.
There's a couple transformers way up in the air.
Yeah, I saw it, and I'm just saying.
Go down to Roselli Pump Station, our backup generator. You need
Practicality.
you need a fire from that. Oh, yeah.
It's
that
crazy.
falls down.
Yeah, that was crazy.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, man. Okay, so agenda action item. As part of the appointment of our new general manager, the new MBU board formally vote to appoint Jeff Bryant as a member of the CMAC board of directors. As an MBU member delegate for CMAC, is there a motion to approve these 2 appointments? Bill, motion made by Bill, someone second. Stu Pugh, any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes.
Congratulations. Welcome aboard.
Although.
I can just explain the next one. So we have an action, I put it under action items because it didn't really fit anywhere else. So we talked about, we retained UFS to do our cost of service. It's an organization that we have experience with, built by the name of Mark Foshamp and a strong team. This is a critical point as ever in the organization to really dig into what our true cost of service is. That will give us guidance on future rate tracks and things along those lines. Having said that, what he strongly recommended and we in parallel asked for was to do a rate making one-on-one workshop so that he could dig into how they make the sauce, if that makes sense. And so That way we'll understand what they're looking at and where they're starting and that type of stuff. So, I know that, for new general manager one-on-one by attempting to schedule 2 special meetings in the first 3 months. But, ultimately that would be required because the March regular board meeting is when we're gonna dig into the budget in earnest. So I don't really want to tie that meeting up with this. So Laura, I think we had some dates of a potential special meeting, if the board was amenable to that.
So we're looking at March 10th, 13th, or the 17th. It would be at least a 2-hour meeting in the afternoon. We generally would schedule it 1:30 to 2 o'clock in the afternoon for a couple of hours, have Mark and his team come in and go through the process. So we're looking to the board to find out availability on either that March 10th, 13th, or the 17th. What would be the best day to have that so that we can coordinate getting Mark here in front of the team and going through all the details.
And keep in mind, we do have economic development subcommittee for those who participate in that. So it's gonna be.
13th or 17th are our choices?
10, 13, or 17.
Realistically, 13 or 17.
13 or 17 probably would be the best so that we're not having back-to-back the 9th and the 10th.
So you want to set rates on Friday the 13th?
I'm looking to have an educational presentation about rate making with our consultant, Mark Beauchamp from Utility Financial Services on either March 13th or March 17th.
Patrick's Day, that could be good luck.
There you
Good
go.
luck.
March
So maybe
17th.
that's the day we should go.
March 17th.
March 17th with that, Stu, is 1:30 okay?
Patrick's Day.
Yes, I'll say yes, although I said that last time, no. I'll then make a special note this time. 1:30 you said?
Yeah, 1:30 on the 17th. Is that good for everyone?
3:17, I got nothing else on my schedule.
What, 1:30 or 2:30?
1:30.
I'm gonna send everyone a meeting invite right now.
Oops.
Thank you, Simone. Get it on the calendar.
10, we're gonna take out. So we're back. 15. Take it St. Patrick's Day.
We're gonna make it early, so we'll still got time to celebrate.
I usually start early in the morning, and celebration, I'm done.
Is that great? Stu? Thank you, sir.
Which will be great. Okay, so with that being said, we have March 17th for our rating one-on-one. That concludes all the action items. That brings us to executive session.
Thank you.
Is there a motion to go into executive session this evening, made by Jerry? Who's on the second then? Second, executive session will be Russell. Any discussions? Those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes for us to go into executive session. You have to read this clause here, required to discuss confidential trade secret and commercially valuable confidential or proprietary information not subject to inspection or public disclosure pursuant to section 1-210, section 5 and 7-23A of Connecticut General Statutes. This information commercially valuable, confidential, and proprietary, and not subject to public disclosure pursuant to Public Act number 98-212 to discuss personal matters of employee or employees and or public official pursuant to chapter 14, section 1-206 of A of the Connecticut General Statute. Yeah, who would you like to have started in our executive session today, sir?
Yeah, this is not gonna be the meeting, but I just need the senior team.
Other than that, you guys have a wonderful evening. Thank you for your time tonight. Thank you, Charles, for the presentations.
Most important promotions next.
Motion to. Wasn't fair, oh,
Yeah, no votes were taken in executive session. There you go.
no votes were taken in executive session.
And motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Jerry, Stu. Any abstentions?
Everyone is in favor? We are adjourned.
You know,
I'm trying to say, thank you.